Welcome back to The Heat. We're discussing the rise of violence against Muslims in America. Let's get back to our panel. Nadia, what did you think of what Donald Trump just said?
I feel like just emerged from him to talk about extreme wall between U.S. and Mexico. It's like, where have you been all these years? It's a wall between the U.S. and Mexico. The U.S. already has an extreme vetting process for immigrants to come into this country, and mosques have been surveilled since 9/11. So I just feel like he's, for those who understand the history of this country, who understand what this country is about, he sounds dumb.
Engy, you know, at the Democratic National Convention, we had one presentation made by Ghazali Khan. He was the father of a soldier who was killed in action. That was a presentation that generated a great deal of news in the country, of course. It also generated a great deal of controversy. What did you make of that? Did it help or hurt the anti-Islamophobia cause?
I think that it actually probably undermined Trump quite a bit, and also Islamophobia. I think that irrespective of an individual's feelings about whether or not we should have intervened in Iraq during the Bush administration, the fact that you had these rather ordinary civilian American Muslims take the stage and deliver such an impassioned speech, and make an impact the way that they did. I mean, oftentimes when their names are referenced, they're described as having stolen the show at the DNC, perhaps only second to Michelle Obama, right? And they touched so many American hearts. They were able to humanize Muslims, American Muslims, in a way that the community has struggled to do for over a decade. And so I think that irrespective of the controversy that emerged, in the aftermath of their speech that they delivered at the DNC, I think that overall that the impact was positive for the American Muslim community. And I think more than that, Khizr and Ghazali Khan, I think, are actually representative of this new phenomenon or trend that has emerged in the context of this presidential election season. And I'm referring specifically, again, to these sort of ordinary, untrained, low-profile members of the American Muslim community who, perhaps out of a sense of urgency because of the escalating Islamophobia that they are seeing, that we all are seeing, are taking matters into their own hands in a very civil and legal way and pushing back against this prejudice and discrimination. So remember, perhaps the first example of that during this season is Rose Hamid, right? The American Muslim woman who's a flight attendant and mother who stood in silent protest at a Trump rally together with her Jewish compatriot with what looked like a Star of David. In doing so, she was escorted, but she escorted out of the rally, but also grabbed headlines, not just around this country, but around the world, right? And again, in this sort of, inadvertent way, helped to define who the American Muslim is. And I think that in a similar vein, that Khizr and Ghazali Khan also did the same. So ultimately, I think that we saw a positive impact.
Arjun, the incidents of violence that we see against Muslims, against Sikhs, do they fall under the broad category of hate crimes in the United States, and how is that tracked?
They do fall, and they are classified as hate crimes. The problem is that reporting of hate crimes by local law enforcement is voluntary, right? So, for example, we know that 17% of local and state law enforcement haven't reported a single hate crime in 6 years. In 2014, the FBI claims that there were a total of 6,000 hate crimes. But there are national surveys that say the number of hate crimes was closer to 600,000. So reporting of hate crimes by local and state law enforcement should be mandatory. That would increase awareness and give community leaders and local and state law enforcement the tools and resources they need to combat hate violence and bigotry.
Nadia, there was a study carried out by the New America Foundation, and there were two things that I want to talk about. One was they found that more right-wing extremists kill Americans than jihadists. That was something we talked about a moment ago. The other thing they found was that the manner in which Muslims are treated by the criminal justice system is very different from the way right-wing extremists are treated. And they found that in many instances, judges hand down harsher sentences to Muslims, longer sentences, and than they do to, say, a right-wing extremist. I mean, how widespread is that?
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, before we speak about Muslims, we should look at what's happening to our African-American brothers in America. I mean, when a black guy and a white guy commit the very same crime, the white guy gets off with 6 months, where the black guy is in, sits and rots in jail for 25 years. So, again, goes back to our very biased criminal justice system, our broken justice system. And so if we're going to talk about justice towards Muslims, I think we need to have a conversation around justice for everyone and what does that look like. Our founding principles and founding fathers founded this country on justice for all. Peace, freedom, and justice for all, but that's not what we're seeing. So what our Constitution says and what is actually being handed down to Americans is very selective and based on your skin color. And I made a post on Facebook the other day, which seemed to get a lot of likes. So if it's okay,
sure,
I'll read it. This was after the killing of Khalid Jabara, the Lebanese Christian guy who was just killed, exactly, by his neighbor. How supremacy, white privilege, police selectivity, and negligence are all inculcated into our broken justice system. The rules of engagement change based on skin color, ethnicity, and the alleged religion of the perpetrator. If the criminal was black or Muslim, you would see a totally different outcome. Where's Fox News, CNN, and the like to give endless, relentless coverage of the story for the next 3 months, like they do when a so-called Muslim or a person of color pulls the trigger? Bloodshed, violence, and terror is our current reality, an inescapable nightmare. What happened to love thy neighbor and not kill thy neighbor? Oh God, please spare us from this new creed of violence.
You see, you got a lot of response to that. I'm not surprised at all. Arjun, you've seen the Shared Responsibility Committee program that the FBI is developing to counter radicalization, to counter violent extremism. What is it exactly?
A Shared Responsibility Committee is a committee that consists of a faith-based leader, a community leader, a mental health professional, and others perhaps from the social sciences, who are brought in to help a Muslim youth who is at risk of becoming a violent extremist. The problem is that the FBI's indicators for youth who are at risk of becoming violent extremists are way over-inclusive. They include things like ideological differences at home, becoming confrontational at home, deciding to attend a mosque. So as a consequence, the FBI are convening these committees to help youth who are at risk of becoming violent extremists, but there's no evidence that they are at risk of becoming violent extremists. In fact, the activities I just described not only characterize adolescents, but apart from that, they're protected under the First Amendment. So CVE programs in general treat all Muslim Americans with collective suspicion, and it's my opinion that they're a miserable failure.
Engy, very quickly, do you think anything can be done in the short term to counter this rise of Islamophobia? I've just got about 40 seconds left.
Absolutely. I think that the general elections this November is going to be a critical moment in American history vis-a-vis the American Muslim community and the future of Islamophobia. Donald Trump certainly did not invent Islamophobia, but he has exacerbated an already dangerous phenomenon, and the future of this country will be drastically affected by who we vote into office in November.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for joining us.